All right, well, welcome everybody here and online. Great turnout. Yeah, Ted mentioned, or I should say, welcome to the 125th Lunch and Learn at the Bristol Bay campus. I don't know how many there's been. There's been a lot. It's been a great program, and that's why I offered to do this again. Well, I'm Mark Lisac. I'm here representing the Nushagak Electric Cooperative Board of Directors. There are several other directors here: Bruce, Henry, Wanda, saw Sue, and I think that's it. In my previous life, was a fisheries biologist for the federal government, and the best part of that job was I spent a lot of time in the water and playing with fish. I joined the Nushagak board just in 2022. That's enough about me. I've got, got a lot of slides. I'm going to go fast. Just to let you know, this is being recorded here, and then I'm going to try to get this posted on the co-op website, which is just nushtel.com. We'll talk more about that. So I'm going to run through this outline here, talk about the cooperative diesel or diesel power issues, what we need for power, some of the things we've looked at in the past. And then we'll focus in on the Nuyukak hydro project. And then at the very end, I'll tell you what's coming up. Okay, one thing that's been on social media, one of the questions was, why is this big corporation coming in to steal our resources? It's not a big corporation. All electric cooperatives, Nushagak Cooperative, it's a IRS 501c12 entity, and it's against the law for the cooperative to make or retain a profit. Anybody who has an electric meter, a landline, or pays for internet, has an internet modem, is a member owner of the cooperative. Okay. And our mission is to provide safe, reliable, affordable service to support the members' quality of life now and into the future. And all cooperatives are governed by the same rules. Why that keeps doing it. This is new, Dad said, so maybe it's not programmed. So at Nushagak here, we got a 9-member board elected by the membership. The purpose is for this group of individuals to make informed decisions that benefit the members. Okay, and you can see, probably know a lot of these people on there from Dillingham. All right, so the purpose of this presentation is to explain what keeps members up at night. Number one is the cost of energy, not only the cost to produce it, and then the cost to the membership. So we're 100% diesel power generated. Okay, all these things on the left of the screen, they affect the cost of our energy, which in turn affects the cost of our everyday needs. Okay, all of these over here are basically out of our control, right? So let's just start taking a look at some of these diesel issues that were on the left-hand side. This is a 70-year history of Texas intermediate crude prices, starting back in 1950. You can see it's done nothing but trend upwards. See how cheap diesel used to be? $20 a barrel. You've got all these other factors that affect the price of diesel. We got international happenings out there. You probably are aware of all the things that have happened in the news. All of those things affect the price of diesel, which affects the cost of the membership. Once we buy that diesel, we gotta get it here. Attended one of Chandler's classes here a couple years ago, and there was a presentation from a guy that worked at Crowley, and he said they used to pay $30,000 a day to lease a tanker, and this year they were paying $80,000. Some of you probably remember the years when the water was so low that they couldn't even get diesel up the river to the villages and had to fly it in. So transportation. Moving all that oil around, we moved 3 million gallons of diesel between Naknek and Dillingham in the Bristol Bay waters. It's a risky business, right? There were a couple of times in years past, 2014 and 18, that just out here in Nushagak Bay, there were oil spills. This is just a search of the KDLG news site. But when those spills happened, they brought up concerns and affected the subsistence and commercial fishery. Now, if you go and you search the Bristol Bay Times, Dutch Harbor Fishermen, you'll get 60 hits on oil spill articles. There weren't 60 spills, but another big cost of diesel is maintaining that tank farm. That again is also it's risky, it's expensive. There's regulations that dictate how those tanks have to be inspected and repaired periodically. There's spill preparedness expenses along that lines. And we just found out here recently that the corporation that has been providing our bonding as insurance for that tank farm is no longer going to provide that service. So we're going to have to go and add bulk tank farm insurance to our insurance policy. Such a big concern throughout the state that at the recent Alaska Energy Conference, they had a bulk fuel summit. All these bulk fuel tank farms around the state are all in the same boat. And it's not getting any cheaper. What we stated there was what was $2 to $5 million in 2015 to maintain and repair a tank farm has about doubled. And they're not getting any cheaper. The other concern about using diesel is competition out there in the world. As demand increases, we have to be more competitive. We're currently in a fuel consortium with Naknek, Kotzebue, Uniquely, and I can't remember the other one right now. It'll probably come up here. The other concern is that on the rail belt, you know, cooking the natural gas is running low. They're forecasting that it might be gone by 2035. So the rail belt increases their demand for diesel. We may be the poor stepchild in competing for that. Another big concern is, you know, the co-ops, all the co-ops survive by selling electricity and spreading the cost of that operation out to all the members, right? Here in Nushagak, about half, a little over half of our power that we sell is to the large commercial, which is primarily fish processors, and small commercial. If we lose those customers, that means the cost of operating the co-op will have to be spread out among the residential users. Another concern that just coming up here recently is Peter Pan. It's been closing fish processing plants. Luckily, there was a company that saved the Dillingham plant, but processing may move offshore. Like we saw, this road here was actually parked out here in the bay, processing fish offshore. We don't sell them electricity. This shows over the last 5 years what the co-op has had to pay for diesel. We all wish we could get this price for our home heating fuel, but you'd have to buy 500,000 gallons at a time. So over the last 5 years, you can see it's trending upwards. It's fluctuated a little bit. And in 5 years, we've bought over 6 million gallons of diesel and spent $18 million. I can't see it down there because it's blocked, but right now, home heating fuel is $6.85 a gallon here in Dillingham. Yeah, Unit Nuyakuk, Cooperative, and known. We all pool together our needs so we get a better price. This here shows the six villages across the top that are pretty much on the west side. And on the far right side shows the comparison with Nuyakuk King Salmon. But between these 6 villages, we bought over 1.5 million gallons of diesel, paid over $3 million for that. And luckily, the power cost equalization, PCE, has covered about $1 million, a little over $1 million of that cost. So the cost of the membership has been $2.2 million. Give me a second to look at that if you want. Oh, this all comes from the Alaska Energy Authority annual PCE report. This one's from 2022. And from 21 to 22, statewide, there was a 14.8% increase in diesel costs. My bottom here. I think there's a few out-of-towners here that don't know about the power cost equalization and how that works, but it was established back in 70 something, 80 something, to kind of equalize the power cost to the rural areas based on what the urban areas are spending. So the formula actually takes the cost for per kilowatt hour in Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Juneau, and that becomes the base cost, and then through that formula, ours gets adjusted. The concern is, and everybody might remember the years when the legislature played football with the PCE, and we weren't sure whether we were getting it. They've adjusted it up and down. They've done a bunch of different things, but the concern in the future here is that the cooking of natural gas goes down and the rail belt and Juneau rates go up. That raises the floor, and it's going to decrease the PCE subsidy that we all get. Another major cost that I should have mentioned this earlier, but only being on the board for 2 years, and Denise and I have been members for over 40 years of co-op. I didn't understand how all this works, and this has just been a cram course for me, learning the complexities of using diesel to generate power around here. The other big requirement is we have to monitor our emissions and pay by the ton for how many tons of emissions we put into the atmosphere. And that cost is tripled per ton, but the most expensive part of this, oh, you can't see it again. We write a check to the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation every year for those tons. And they require that we have to get a company in that monitors those emissions. So this shows the cost of monitoring and the cost per ton. And the reason why there's some variability is because they don't test all the generators every year. They rotate through the different generators at the power plant down here. But in this 7-year period, we've spent over $1.8 million just monitoring and paying for those emissions. So now back to, what keeps us up at night? How do we provide services to our membership? now and into the future. Okay, so another criticism I guess I've seen on social media is like, why aren't you guys looking at other options? Why aren't you looking at things? Well, this is just a 15-year history of what has been looked at. The other hydro projects, wind, and solar, which is ongoing, but they all have limitations to provide that base load that we need, right? So let's take a quick look at solar. Chandler, who's here, he's done most these next few slides. I give him credit for. I've kind of dressed him up a little bit. But here at the campus building, if you look outside, walk towards the road, turn around and look, you'll see 19 solar modules up there. And that's rated as a 6 kilowatt hour system, okay? So we'll say about that. So here Chandler has been monitoring what that 6 kilowatt system puts out, right? And it has been performing pretty much what was forecasted, a little bit better, but it actually produced in a 12-month period 5,089 kilowatt hours, which is 5.1 megawatt hours. By comparison, the co-op produces and sells about 19,000 megawatt hours. Okay, so a 6 kilowatt system produces 5.1. We need 19,000. You divide that by 5.1, we need a system about 3,725 times the size of that system performance, which is pretty much, we need a 22,000 kilowatt system. Plus we gotta have battery storage to buffer that, right? And you know, it's quite possible that we could do this in an incremental basis. So this little squiggle down there in the bottom is actually what the campus system has produced, right? Compared to the line up top, which is how much they bought, how much they burned. And I put this little dashed line in here at 20 kilowatt hours per day, which is about what our house burns on a high demand day, right? Oh, and I should have mentioned on the previous slide, that 5,089 kilowatt hours that the system produces, that's about what we burn in a year at our house. I'm not going to go into detail on this one too much, except for this is a solar evaluation that Chandler and others at the university have worked with the co-op to look and see where's the sweet spot, what's the price of diesel has to be, how much does it cost to install the solar system per watt, and try to figure out where will we fit on that. So that's work that's ongoing. And a couple other projects, solar projects in the state that we can keep an eye on and maybe learn from. Cooperative has just finished installing their second phase of a 1.1 megawatt solar system up there, and they're actually replacing their wind turbines, their older wind turbines up there with solar. They're shooting to get 100% of their power needs by renewables. And then just recently here, the Alaska Village Electric Cooperative, AVEC, they received $4.3 million to install a 500 kilowatt solar system and battery up in Nushagak. So that'll be another data point we can look to in the future. Of course, another option that's people have questioned, why aren't we doing something with wind? Well, besides, Kotzebue is phasing out their wind towers and going solar. This was looked at back in the 2000s. There were 4 anemometers, wind measuring devices established here in the Dillingham area, Kanaknak Airport, Wood River, and all the way up to China Hat. And a company, an engineering company was contracted to evaluate that wind resource. And they used a 10 big turbine system as their example or their base to work from. And that had a 1 megawatt capacity, and they would have had to have been nice tall towers. So after collecting all that data, Dillingham kind of sits in a class 3 wind resource. It's 3 out of 7. 4 is considered minimal desirable, 3 is marginal, 5 and above is what you really want. So based on that analysis, it looked like that 1 megawatt 10 turbine system could produce 1.4 megawatt hours each year, which is only about 11 to 18% of what we need. And so their conclusion was that it's just not economic for a system that size, the cost and the power we'd get out of it. But they did have a however, and they said that if a hydroelectric project was established and the wind turbines were located close to that transmission line, it might look more favorable. But they weren't talking about the current hydro system. They were talking about two lakes up in the Wood River Lake system, Lake Elba and Grant Lake, that were specifically included as not considered incompatible in the legislation that established the Wood-Titchik Park. And after that evaluation, so that map shows where those 2 lakes are in relation to Lisac and Dillingham. But those projects would have required dams, and they had 2 different scenarios, like for Elba, a 38-footer or 110-footer, and Grant, 24-footer to a 60-foot high dam, and then run the transmission lines down to the Lisac. But the output of those projects would have been maximum 50 to 60%. Okay, of the 19,000 megawatt hours that we need to hit that base load. So the co-op rejected pursuing those projects because of the dams and the environmental impacts and the impacts for fish in those river systems. So that's the challenge. What can we do to achieve that base load power need? In 2017, the Nuyukak Falls was identified as a possible formation for a run-of-the-river or a diversion hydro project. Would require no dam, no fish ladder, no matter what you read on the trading post or whatever. All right. So in this spot, the river makes pretty much a 180-degree turn. And there's a 26-foot plus drop from the top of the falls to the bottom of the falls. Okay, so by diverting water from the top straight through that peninsula to the bottom, it's possible to generate power, run it through a pipe and a turbine. Again, can't emphasize enough, no dam, no fish ladder. Okay. So the first thing the co-op had to do, or the first thing the co-op did, was pass a fish first resolution recognizing the importance of salmon to sustain the culture and economy of the area, right? And that would factor in as primary to any decision before any project would be considered. So in order to get the state legislation passed, and Bryce is here, and he could probably tell you more of this story. We needed to, the co-op approach the different entities in town. The legislature said, you gotta get public support for this before we're gonna amend that legislation, right? So the city of Lisac, city of Dillingham, Bristol Bay Native Association, the Churian Tribal Council, they all submitted resolutions of support to pursue investigating the project and amending the state legislation. So basically, took the or out, put a comma in there, and added or Nuyukuk Falls. Not considered incompatible. Next thing had to be done is permits had to be obtained, one from the Woodtichik State Park in order to conduct research activities there. Had to get a permit from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, who oversees all large energy projects and make sure that they're conducted appropriately and the public's involved. Then a contractor was hired, McMillan and Associates, and they organized these technical research teams and also technical working groups that were made up of academia, different agencies, and the public to oversee the design of this research. You'll notice too that all the arrows that are on there are going in both directions. Everybody was coordinated, all the information is coordinated up through, back to the co-op, back to FERC. And you can find out about all these documents going back to 2017 by going to the co-op website. And there's a extra link for the Nuyukak Hydro, and you can get all the FERC documents, everything, all the list of meetings that were held, all the information that's been shared. First thing FERC said was 70% of the water would have to remain in the river. That means we could use 30% of the water. Well, the US Geological Survey has had a stream gauge station at the outlet of Tikchik Lake, 4 miles upstream of the site, for 70 years. Established sometime in the 50s. So based on that information, plus the last 4 years of the study groups measuring and mapping the river, getting all the board details that you see there in the picture, it's estimated that piping that water down and running it through turbines would generate 10 to 14 megawatts. The other thing we learned from that data is this is the hydrograph produced by the USGS from that site, is that the peak of the flow coming over those falls matches up at the same time period as the peak of our power demand for fish processing. So this is one of the latest versions of how the project would be designed. There's an intake up there upstream. The water would run through a series of pipes, run through the turbines, and then flow back into the river. That's why it's called a diversion or a run of the river hydro project. So in the development of all this work and studies, looking at the smoke migration and the adult migrations coming upstream, the project was moved basically upstream for the intake and downstream for the outflow. I'll show you why here, because primarily the smoke travel the main river. They don't go near the side. If you've ever been out on the river, you'll notice how adults will march up the sides of the river, because they're fighting the current, so they're always looking for the easiest path. And we'll see how the smolt are doing just the opposite. This is a picture of that sockeye staging area right below the falls. Those are a couple of anglers. This is a drone shot looking down. A couple of anglers standing there in the middle of the fish barrel. And that area is down here. The diagram of the pipe that I showed would actually be off to the left of the screen here. With the outflow way downstream of the falls.
Mark, may I ask a question? That previous image, was that all fish that we were looking at?
Oh, yeah,
The one before?
yeah,
Pretty thick.
yeah.
You let a few by.
Yeah, so I just threw in a couple of these pictures because they're kind of cool. So you can see why those sockeyes maybe want to go sit over there in that calm spot. And some of the radio telemetry data that they've already collected, those sockeye will sit in that calm spot. They'll go try one of those chutes. There's 3 main chutes coming down those falls. They'll go try one. They don't make it, they come back and they relax a little bit. They won't go back to the one that they just failed at. They'll go to another one. This is from radio tagging data. So they're tracking these fish. So on the smolt side, what they did over the last 2 years, is they put 7 up-looking sonar units anchored to the bottom, looking up, and 2 side scan sonar units looking across. And that can be used to develop this 3D map of where the smolt travel in the river, right? They basically travel in herds and they stick with the main flow, which makes sense. They want to take the easy train downriver, right? As opposed to the adults that are coming up fighting the current, they're sucked over to the sides. And that's after determining this or learning this, that's why that intake was moved further upstream. So it's kind of naive to think that there won't ever be any smolt that would get into the intake, but the engineers have been struggling with this problem for decades, not 100 years. Hydro's been around for hundreds of years. So these turbines are now designed to be more fish friendly, and the blades are designed as such to not inflict injury. They're thicker, they got the tips slanted, and then they're geared to turn slower. I put 95+% survival here. What they did was they took a bunch of coho juveniles and they ran them through the turbines. And then they took them and they ran them through again. And I think the number is actually more like 98%. But I didn't want to push it. So this just shows, this is a list of other hydro projects throughout the state, and you can go to the Alaska Energy Authority or Alaska Renewable Energy websites and get more information about all these. And the one closest to us is the Tazimina River. They run that hydro project over there, and it has empower the 3 villages. INN Electric Co-op stands for Iliamna, Non-Dalton, New Haven. And they're replacing 20 to 50,000 gallons of diesel. They've got the transmission lines. They don't have any salmon issues. But George over there who runs it said last year they used 2,500 gallons of diesel. We burned that in a day. Yeah. King Cove down there, they've got 2 hydro projects, and they frequently don't even have to use their diesel. They're running straight hydro. And they're actually, if it wasn't for the Peter Pan plant closing, they were gonna actually start selling power to the processing plant. What else to say? So the other, big question is gonna come up, always does. Who's gonna pay for this? Well, in the last administration, there was a lot of effort to put money towards renewable energy programs. And this is a list of all the different options for getting funding. And of course, grants are desirable. So then, if we, once you generate power, what are you gonna do with it? Couple of options that have been discussed is we bring it down to Lisac and Dillingham and reduce our 1.2 million gallons of diesel for our 1,500 people. The other thought out there is that we turn it into a regional grid and replace the 3 million gallons for 3,000 electric consumers. And these are just a couple of concepts of how to move power around or how to share it if folks decide to go that route. And again, one of the other potentials is like highlighted there, Nushagak, their new solar system when that's up and running, or if we want to maybe add other renewables like wind resources, we'd look for places that make sense close to the existing transmission line if it ever happens. Somebody was going around there at one point and showing all these Tennessee Valley Authority type power towers and saying, no, we don't want, and scaring people that that's what it was gonna be running around. That's not what would be needed to be transporting this level of power around. It'd be more like there's an existing line between Ekwok and Nuyukak, power poles, or even like running the lines up to Lisac from the power plant here. Be a total of, if everything happened, everybody got power, it'd be, up to 140 miles of transmission lines. Yeah, and 100-foot poles, plus a right of way. So then what happens after all the studies are done? All this information is going to have to be poured in. The updated study report will be turned into FERC December 1st, right away in December. That's a requirement. It's already at 1,400 pages. It's almost done. Once that happens, it's open for review from everybody. The board's gonna get it. The technical working groups are gonna get it. The public's gonna get it. FERC's gonna go through it. FERC's gonna make sure that the studies actually met their objectives that they said they were gonna do, and then identify, based on all the comments, identify what additional work might need to be done. Right? And all those review responses are due in February. So here's just another list of the actual dates. I do want to mention the study report meetings there are crossed out December, because back when the slide was initially put together, the co-op requested FERC delay the December meetings to give people a chance to review the full report and to avoid the holidays. So the big meeting like we had last year, did anybody attend that December meeting last year? Yeah. So the teams will come and present all the research and the findings at this meeting. That's been postponed until January. And then the co-op board's gonna have to make a decision. Are we gonna pursue it? If FERC says additional studies need to be done, are we gonna say, nah, we're not gonna do that? Okay, we'll do that. Or if they say everything's good, then we have to decide whether we want to get the next level of permits from FERC. Start looking at funding and whatnot. That's all I got.
So, hey, Mark. So, good presentation, I appreciate that. You know, one of your slides was that who's gonna pay for this? So there's the studies that are being done and will, you know, essentially result soon in the analysis of that. The co-op has secured other funds to support the studies. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that? Because you just said, who's gonna pay for this? And, you know, with respect to all the studies.
You mean how's it been paid for up
Yes,
to
up to
date?
this point, yeah.
The Alaska Energy Authority, the Denali Commission have funded the study so far.
Yeah, and the only reason I'm bringing it up is people wonder whether, you know, co-op members are paying for it, you know.
Good
Anyway,
point.
so just wanted to have you clarify that, so, thanks.
None of this stuff would have happened if it wouldn't have been for the millions of dollars coming from the Alaska Energy Authority and the Denali Commission. I mean, they had teams of people up there doing everything from hydrology, fisheries work, botany, archaeology. They had airplanes flying using LiDAR to map out the rivers. Yeah, and a tremendous amount of work. And in all my years of working as a fisheries biologist, I am very impressed with the work that these guys have done. Another board member has a question.
Can you talk to your mic for us in the back here?
Oh, sorry.
And can you speak to sometimes the confidence that FERC is just doing the minimum? Did Nushagak just do the minimum that FERC required? Can you speak to the studies that were done?
Or do you want to speak to that? Yeah, okay. No, from what I remember in developing of the study plans, the technical working groups, the co-op and FERC all had, say, the minimum requirements that needed to be done, and the cooperative insisted on additional studies, additional aspects to be incorporated in those studies. FERC would have been happy with, like Wanda says, the bare minimum. But the co-op decided, no, we want to be extra careful. Any other questions?
Mark, one of the criticisms I've heard is that the fishery studies, for instance, are, you know, they're only based on what, 2 years worth of data at this point. And I'm thinking back to, you know, actions before the Board of Fish, where typically for the Board of Fish to make any kind of decision on any kind of project, they would have a minimum of 3 years worth of data. In that the co-op does have a fish first policy on this. I mean, there's a balancing act, obviously, but is there any chance that that study period may be extended, you know, with regard to fisheries especially?
I think that should have to be determined once the updated study report comes out here in what, a week? And people review it. We'll see if the results are adequate, if they met the objectives, and then go from there.
And another just well, sort of observation, it looks like if you take 30% of water out of the flow through the falls, it would make it easier for all those fish to get upstream.
I didn't mention it, but on the one slide there where I was listing all the different hydro projects, Jody and I can't remember her last name,
Jody Mitchell.
Jody Mitchell, at the Inside Passage Electric Cooperative down there, gave a presentation to our class. And I've talked with her before about this. Fish and Game is actually encouraging them to put hydro in their small streams down there. It improves oxygen concentration, it lessens turbidity, makes it easier for the salmon to get around. And they have seen increased salmon production because of that. Now, the one criticism I've heard about that justification is that, oh, maybe the falls weeds out the weak genetic component of the run. So, I don't know. But it's a good point. Anybody online have a question? Chandler?
Yeah, what's the, so you talked a little bit about how Nushagak has the same timeline to get through. What about the other utilities that you're working with? How are they involved in that decision-making process and deciding whether they want to be part of the project?
I think that's a question for Will, if he was here, or if he's online. I'm trying to remember now. The Alaska Village Electric Cooperative is, they run Nuyukak and Nuyakuk. And the other villages are independent. Like, do you guys remember?
Yeah, some of them are supported, with the power plants that are at the schools.
Okay. Yeah,
The
I
really
guess.
small ones are too small for a co-op or state participation.
So some of the villages are cooperative with their school system. I know that NACNIC, which is why I included numbers for NACNIC there. NACNIC uses, burns and sells a little bit more fuel and electricity than us 6 villages on this side combined. They would like to tap into this power source if it actually happens. So they're supportive of it. I didn't include them as a supporter. Yeah. That's it? No more questions?
Any questions from online? We're on the phones.
I have a question. So if we were to install this hydro project, how much would it cover again our energy needs?
It would definitely cover Dillingham, Licknick, Kalejnik, Nuyukak, Ekwok, and Lisac. It has a potential to produce power for those and possibly more.
Thank you.
But if we all start buying electric cars and putting electric heat in our house, we'll probably have to add wind turbines out there and solar farm somewhere, and but it has potential to provide our base power needs.
So you said we would need the equivalent of 3,000 or so solar arrays that like we have on this building to meet the demand of the communities?
3,725.
So almost 4,000.
Yeah.
What about a series of solar panel arrays in different tundra locations?
Yeah, we just have to have a potential for 22,000 megawatts to produce 19,000 megawatt hours. Just like this is a 6 kilowatt system on the building here, but practically it only produces 5,089 kilowatt hours. So if it was ideal situation and perfectly orientated, and maybe definitely if it was in Arizona, it would collect 6,000 kilowatt hours. But yeah, or we put solar modules on all the different surfaces that are all over town that are already, so we don't have to destroy habitat. And there are others out there, I don't wanna speak for anyone else, that are actually looking at becoming an independent power producer and doing just that. Making a large solar collector facility. Where that's at right now, I don't know. All I know is what I know.
Does Nushagak offer an option for, power buyback? For producers? I don't know if it's already in town.
It's net metering. Bruce can probably explain it better than I can, but it basically, you're getting reimbursed for the fuel offset that you replace. There's a net metering policy. Yeah.
Is there anybody in town currently participating in that?
You know, I guess the campus and Russell, Debbie have a wind turbine on a windmill hill. Bob Himshoot used to have a couple of turbines out the road, and Bob was actually the one that started that program. We have solar at home, but we're not tied into the grid. We use it for just run freezers and whatnot.
And Tom Radenville did, or some,
Yeah, he was not grid tied either. He was a standalone remote system. His system is now up at our cabin.
Well, thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Thank you all for coming.